And I've had grown men, when I'm doing this particular technique, just burst into tears.
Ben is a bike fitter. If you don't know what that is, he'll explain it much better than I would in the first few minutes of this podcast.
If you imagine there's like a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 being the most comfortable, and then 0 is like you got spikes on the handlebar. Most people are about 3 or 4.
Why do you think they accept to live with it? Is it because they don't know there's a solution?
Yeah.
I sent him a DM on Instagram to inquire about his bike fitting process, and through our discussions, I thought, why not have him on the podcast? So you said your bike fitting process takes long.
It's usually between 8 and 10 hours.
10 hours?
Yeah, you can't do a bike fit in less than 4 hours.
How come? Bike fitting might look technical from the outside between the measurements, the equipment they use, but the way he talks about it is really about understanding the people, how they move, how they adapt, even down to how they breathe.
That breathing technique is the body's way of priming itself to either fight or flight. So we can actually teach you how to put your body into that state. And what you see is a significant increase in power, albeit temporarily.
It feels like that's where art blends in with the science.
Tension is the enemy of performance. So there's certain techniques that we can teach you to clear your brain. Do you want me to show you?
Yeah.
Collarbone, and then head. And what you're doing is you're oxygenating all of your body. I think that one of the reasons why Pogacar is so good is he's so...
In this episode, we talk about biomechanics, injury, performance, human nature, even breathing, and why sometimes the biggest improvements can come from the smallest adjustments. Let's get into it, c'est parti. Ben, first thing first, so that we get to know you. How would you introduce yourself as a human?
Oh, that's never been
in the
asked
deep,
that question.
Straight in the deep end.
Well, I'm a passionate cyclist and who happens to do a job within cycling. So I get, every day I get to do my hobby and get paid for it, which is fantastic. So I am a bike fitter. And then other than that, as a human, I'd like to think I'm a reasonable dad. Or good dad. I always want to be a good dad, and good partner to Emma, and I just want to be just a good human, really. I suppose that's first and foremost ahead of everything. Just being a good human.
So when you meet someone at a dinner party and they ask what you do, they have no idea what cycling is. I mean, they know cycling is riding your bike, but they don't know much about cycling. How do you explain what you do?
I suppose the best analogy is that we try and fit somebody to their bike like you would fit somebody with a tailored suit. So you can buy an off the peg shirt from Next or wherever, but buying a tailored shirt is a very different experience. So what we do is we tailor the bike so it fits somebody perfectly, and usually that analogy sort of helps them understand.
What pulled you into bike fitting?
So when I was 13, I was a horrendous child, really, like awful teenager. And my mum went to the local bike shop and said, my son is such a nightmare. Can he come and work with you? And they said, well, no, really.
Obviously.
And they said, "What?" My mum said, what about if I pay his wages? So they said, okay, then. So I got paid £5 by my mum that I didn't know at the time to work in this bike shop called Bexley Spoke. And Bexley Spoke was the mecca, really, of cycling in Kent in the late 80s, early 90s. So it opened in 89 and it shut in 1992. And we were very fortunate as a member of staff that I worked with two of the greatest frame builders that arguably have ever lived. So I worked with Mark Joint, who later became Mark Riley, who set up Riley Bikes. Okay. And Enigma, and I had various other things. He was a terrible businessman, really, really terrible businessman. And Ron Cooper, who used to build frames for Eddie Merckx and, built frames for Robin Williams. And so Ron was, again, widely renowned as one of the greatest frame builders ever. And even as a child, at 13, I was obsessed with marginal gains. So what I would do is I wasn't a particularly strong cyclist, so I had to find other ways of maximising my potential. So I was obsessed with this. They had a jig in the bike shop, and I sort of learned how to measure people for frames. Okay. So that started when I was about 13. The shop shut when I was 16, and then reopened about 2 years later under a different name. And Mark Riley actually taught me the basics of bike fitting. So I should say that after about a month of being in the bike shop, my mum told me about the story.
The wages.
And because I was a reasonable salesman, they actually paid me £10 and I could stay the whole day. And it was some of the greatest times of my life. I mean, really amazing times. And every week at school, I'd look forward to the Saturday when I was working in the shop. And then I became a full-time member of staff 2 years later when I was about 18. So that's sort of how it started, really.
Okay. Why do you care?
The reason I care is that, first, again, there's the performance aspect, which is, I was obsessed with. And then there's also the comfort aspect. So I don't think that anyone should ever ride in pain. And I think that cycling is such an amazing sport for a start. My dad summed it up the other day. He was saying, all these people that you've met in cycling, he said, none of them sound like arseholes.
Yeah.
And they're not. So even if you go to events and I met Greg LeMond the other day. It's the first time I've ever met him.
Oh, wow.
I met him at Rouleur. I was doing a talk at Rouleur and I met him. He was just amazing. And, they always say you should never meet your heroes. But in cycling, every cycling hero that you could ever meet, that they are exactly how you'd want them to be.
Yeah.
Whereas I've met professional footballers in the past and you think, it's not quite so great. So you get a lot of lovely people in cycling. And, when you become a cyclist, there's that freedom. For me as a child, that started, with the freedom to be able to go somewhere. And I want other people to experience that. But the flip side of that is that the more comfortable you are, the further you're likely to go. And,
true.
The better your cycling journey becomes. And then, then I look at the other side of that, the performance side of it. There are an awful lot of cyclists that we see, particularly at World Tour, who are nowhere near optimal.
Even at World Tour stage.
Even at World Tour. And they've been paying a lot of money. And, we optimise them on their bike. And when they win races, a little bit of you goes with that.
Yeah.
So you can sort of look at the screen and sort of say, I was part of that. That tiny percentage, that was me. And that's what fires me up. And obviously, the more cyclists we get cycling, the safer the roads become.
Yeah.
So
that's very true. That is very true, yeah. Because when you've got more cyclists, obviously, you want to build more infrastructures to make cycling better. And
the other thing is as well, in the 90s, every single time I'd go out for a ride, it was dangerous, like really, really dangerous. And then in 1999, Lance Armstrong won the Tour. And suddenly there's all these people talking about, cycling. And before 1999, if you went to a barbecue and people saw you with shaved legs, they go, why have you shaved your legs? Well, I'm a cyclist. And they're, well, what's that then? And then after 1999, everyone was talking about Lance Armstrong. And so you'd go to a barbecue and then there'd be a bit of chat about that. And then, oh, you're a cyclist as well. Oh, come and have a look at my bike. And you'd see this very overweight, middle-aged man with a top carbon bike. And then those people would then get together. And then what happened is that I think that throughout, the last 25, 26 years, the more people that were riding bikes, the more courteous they became as drivers, because obviously they then, sort of they're on their bike and nearly getting knocked off, and then they appreciate that they need to give a little bit of space to that person. So there's lots of different. I'm sort of rambling on a bit now, but but I think the more people we can get cycling, the better. And then if I could be part of that in terms of making people comfortable, then obviously we have a great cycling nation, and it'll all be down to me.
We'll give you the credit.
Thanks very much.
So you talk about World Tour riders that you can, contribute to this 1 or 2% that's going to make them win the race, or help them win the race. Does the average cyclist need bike fitting if they're not looking for that extra 1% or that extra 2%?
Bike fitting is for everyone, really. What we tend to find is at World Tour that riders are super absorbers, so they can absorb a lot of discomfort that you and I can't. Most of them every day they're having a massage, they have a soigneur that usually follows maybe 4 riders that are grouped together in a particular town. So their muscles are in great condition, but it means when we sort of see riders, we're looking at perhaps like length of handlebar stem. You can sort of say to the rider, is that okay? And they'll say, yeah, that's fine. And then you go a bit further forward. Is that okay? Do you notice any difference? No, I could ride that, and and so on. Whereas when you deal with an amateur, the window that you've got is tiny. It's really, really tiny. So World Tour riders have different issues to address, because really what we want to do is, because they're super absorbers, in a lot of cases, trying to pinpoint the exact point where that stem might be optimal for them can in some cases be quite difficult. Whereas with most amateur riders, no, that's too long. Yeah. No, that's too short. So the requirements are different. What I find very easy with World Tour riders is that they notice different things in terms of particularly around feet, and they're very aware of their bodies. Okay. So although that range, it sounds like I've contradicted myself, but there is a range in which you can get somebody in that's a World Tour rider. In terms of handlebar stem, that can be sort of 3 to 4 centimeters difference, and they can ride in any of those positions. But with some amateur riders that have got huge asymmetry, the margin is tiny. And in some cases, with particularly people that are massively injured, you have a pocket of comfort, and either side of that you have there's discomfort. In some cases, what we actually have is a pocket of discomfort, a pocket of least discomfort, and then a pocket of discomfort. So what we're trying to find is that pocket of least discomfort for certain individuals, depending on injury history.
So there is not always a pocket of comfort. Sometimes
no, not
it's just
always.
Okay. How come?
Well, it depends on the injury that the person may or may not have, or the asymmetry of that particular body. If you're dealing with, we deal with a lot of para riders, so we deal with people that got one arm, one leg, and the compensatory measures that particular body will have absorbed, for want of a better word, over that duration that injury has occurred for. Some people have had a leg missing since they were a teenager, and so the body has learned to adapt into that position.
Yeah,
and they might not necessarily have been a cyclist before, and all of the different things that they've done as an individual up to that point will change the way that body works in terms of cycling. Okay. So you may find that if you've got a missing arm, for instance, that the body will do this. So it sort of twists away from that region. But that also happens with people that have, all of their limbs. You may find that somebody's broken an arm at some point and then twisted away, because they're always... Whenever there's trauma within the body, the body remembers it. And sometimes it can be triggered by something like today, like cold weather. Yeah. So if you've got, a broken arm, for instance, the trauma of that pain that you experience from that broken arm lives within the body forever. So you're always slightly more conscious of it. until you break the other arm and then even it out.
So that's the solution then, break the other arm.
Exactly. So I'm not suggesting that, of course.
Not at all.
But yeah, so, in answer to your question, I think that they're two different things, and we approach them very differently. Ultimately, what you're looking for is to make that rider as comfortable and as optimal as they can within the parameters of what they can do within their body.
So why do you think amateur cyclists or the everyday cyclists, why do you think they normalize that pain? Why do you think they accept to live with it? Is it because they don't know there's a solution?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And also it's the frame of reference that that individual has. So I'll give you an example. So we work with Lake shoes. So a little plug there. And what Lake do is they do a different shoe for different shapes of feet. So what we found is that particularly since lockdown, the foot shape has changed because people are working from home, so they don't put their shoes on. So therefore, when they walk around the house, the foot actually starts to spread if that's done long enough. And there were an awful lot of people that came to cycling during lockdown that were different shapes and sizes to you and I. So, so Lake got on board with that. And they genuinely make some of the most comfortable shoes available. Now, what we're finding is that when people come to us for a bike fit, I'll sort of say to them, how do your shoes feel? And they'll say, yeah, they feel really comfortable for a cycling shoe. And then I sort of say, no, that's not what I'm asking. How do your shoes feel? And they say, yeah, they're comfortable for a cycling shoe. And that's not what we want. We want them to be completely comfortable. And genuinely, after, anecdotally, if you have a look at some of the reviews that we've had, everything is all about the feet. You'll see all of the comments says, oh my God, I can't believe how much my feet feel so much better than they were before. We had a guy that came in and I did his cleat alignment. So we have what we call position 1.
Okay.
And so I put the cleats on, measured where the structural parts of his feet were, put the cleats on where I thought it would be. And he said, wow, that is amazing. I've never felt my cleats feel so comfortable in my cycling shoes. It's just amazing. I said, well, hang on a minute. Let me just adjust this, because what I was observing is that his knee was on the inside of his big toe. So I adjusted the cleat to allow for that. He said, that's even more comfortable.
So now you're in position 2.
Yeah, position 2. And then he says, that's even more comfortable. I can't believe that. He said, but now that one's done, the other one doesn't feel quite right. And I said, no, I know what that is. So let me just adjust that. And then we looked at insoles, and then we did some wedging for him. And the point of where he thought was optimal, where he said to me, wow, that's optimal, position 1, was actually 9 positions further on.
9 positions?
9 positions further on. So, I'm not interested in making somebody better, like comfortable. I want it to be absolutely perfect. And that's what, that's why a fit with us takes quite a long time.
So you're trying to reach that level of comfort?
Yes.
Can you quantify comfort?
I did a talk at Rouleur, which was about the future of bike fit. And at the moment, I think we're way, way away from AI taking over bike fitting. Thank goodness. So, because, if you take saddle pressure mapping, for example, it tells us where the pressure points are, not whether something is comfortable. But if I said to you, Hamadel, I'm observing this, do you feel that? Then you can then articulate back, yeah, I do actually. That's not particularly comfortable. I think that I should adjust this in whatever way it would be. So it really is down to communication. So it's the communication where I get you to understand what you should be feeling, and then you're reporting back to me as to whether that has changed for the better or for the worse.
It feels like that's where art blends in with the science.
Yeah. I mean, we do have things that we can test, for instance. So we can have a look at knee deviation and how that affects how somebody applies force to the pedals. So if the knee tracks inwards, generally what you tend to find is that the foot will rotate over and then push for a certain part of the pedal. And we've got pedal pressure mapping. So we can see whether somebody's pedaling like this or pedaling like that, and then seek to correct that. But where I think what you're talking about is proprioception. So there are certain things that we can do to trick the body into feeling something that then adjusts something further along.
Okay.
So an example of that would be that if you imagine that that's the sole of the shoe and this is your foot within the shoe, most shoes are flat. So they're in a neutral state. And then what happens is the foot wants to be held at this angle, like this. And the foot will rotate over until it detects something underneath it, and it will pull the knee over. So this is where insoles come in, for example. It's not a pitch to sell insoles, by the way.
Yeah.
So once you've brought the sole up to the foot, then that knee then no longer deviates. So it's a way of tricking the foot. Now, it doesn't structurally hold the foot up. The foot senses something underneath it and then knows not to rotate over. So part of it is that sort of, black magic, and then part of it is utilising the sensitivities of the feet to prevent that knee from rotating over. Okay. So it's part science, part magic.
Yeah. I mean, magic is still important because, I guess it's the same with science in general, is you need an intuition to guide you in a certain way.
Yes.
And then you test your hypothesis.
Exactly.
To verify or not, and then you're able to adjust. But you need that initial, intuition to go in a certain direction first.
Yeah.
How quickly can you tell that someone is fighting their bike or their body is fighting the position that they're trying to hold?
When they walk in.
Okay.
So when somebody walks in, I've already analysed. I know what I'm going to do already. But part of our process is to get the client to understand exactly what we're looking at. So this is why we have so much technology at our studio. So as soon as somebody walks in, I think drop shoulder, possibly had a shoulder injury at some point or something down that arm there somewhere. That person's got a twisted shoulder, twisted pelvis. When they're sitting there having a cup of tea, they're rotated around. Okay, something's gone on there, lower back issue, whatever it might be. There's going to be tension here. As soon as that person then gets onto the bike, when we do motion capture, we can show them how those injuries correlate to how they produce force on the bike and how they hold themselves on the bike. So that's as soon as they walk in, I know exactly how they're going to ride.
Just at looking at them. So you said your bike fitting process takes long. You mentioned it. How long does it take?
It's usually between 8 and 10 hours.
10 hours?
Yeah.
Because when I look at bike fits online or in, bike fitting places or bike shops, it's usually an hour or 2.
Hour and a half to 3 hours.
Yeah. 10 hours.
Yeah, 10 hours. We sort of pitch it as a spa day for cycling. So the morning is dedicated to analysis, and then the afternoon is dedicated to getting you in the right position. Well, you're coming to see us, aren't you? So,
hopefully.
So you'll be able to report back. So, it is. I mean, in my opinion, and this is really going to upset quite a few bike fitters out there. You can't do a bike fit in less than 4 hours. And certainly not to the level that we do.
Why?
Because most of the issue with the bike fit is trying to get the client to understand why their body is moving in that way. And that takes time. And, there are certain things that you can do, but then it becomes dictatorial. So you're sort of dictating to the client that you're doing this. So I'm going to do this because this is what I'm observing, rather than, do you remember what we saw in the postural assessment and then how that correlated to how you were pedaling on the bike? And they go, yes. Okay, I'm going to try this because I think this would make a difference. And then you make the change and then they go, yeah, that's made a difference. Whereas if you don't do that, if you just go and, dictate that that's going to happen, they'll sort of, I can't really feel a difference. Well, I'm definitely right because I'm the bike fitter. It's not about that. Yeah. So we want, and the other thing is as well, with very complicated cases, if you're limited to a 3-hour window, so let's say you start at 9, you need to finish at 12 because your next client is coming in at 12:30. when in some cases we're spending that amount of time just trying to sort the feet out because of an issue that somebody may have, and then you're looking at the clock thinking, I've got another client coming in a bit. You can't do it, so we dedicate the whole day to that individual. Now, in some cases, we're finished at 4:30, and in some cases, I mean, in the past, I've ordered a curry, for.
Oh, well, for dinner.
For dinner, because the client said, I'm really hungry, I haven't brought enough food.
Yeah, 10
no
hours
problem, I'll get a curry. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not 8 to 10 hours of boredom.
No.
Hopefully, anyway.
And I've seen in most of your reviews anyway that people pointed out you've got great tea and cakes, which cyclists absolutely love. Cyclists swear by hot drinks and cakes.
We do pride ourselves on our tea and coffee. I think I'd be more disappointed if somebody told me that I made a terrible cup of tea than I would like being a terrible bike fitter.
Then we'll revoke your cycling badge for sure. Definitely. But wow, 10 hours I very much look forward to finding out what it's all about.
Oh, it is great. We had the president of the IBFI, which is our governing body, come down, and he had to do a peer review for me. And he said, I'd heard about your process. And he said, no, I just didn't get it. He said, now I get it.
Yeah.
So, and that was validation. That's really what I wanted. It is unique within the market. But we do quite well. I mean, we've got a 3-month waiting list. People come from all over the world to come and see us. But it's not just the bike fit either. We also teach you how to breathe and pedal more efficiently as well. So, it's so much more than just a bike fit.
But it's good and it's reassuring to hear that you've got that two-way channel open for communication and for feedback. Because like you said, some bike fitters, they just dictate whatever the science says or whatever needs to be correct, and they'll say you need to be at this degree, this angle, your hip needs to be at that angle.
That's right.
That's how it is. That's how we're going to fit you. But you've got that communication going. Does this feel right? Is it wrong? Does it feel better? Does it feel worse? And
I mean, there is a place for those knee angle things. I mean, not for us. I mean, we use something called STT, which is like motion capture system, and it's got knee angles and things like that. But we don't use it for bike fitting. We use it for analysis because if the dots move, for instance, or move on the clothing, then if you're using that as solely as your bike fitting sort of guide, for want of a better word, it just doesn't work. And also that's based on an algorithm, and people are not algorithms. So the technology, when you use it in the right way, is brilliant. It's always the interpretation of data that's important. And how you use that data. Funny, there's a thing at the moment which is on crank length, as an example. Now, which crank length should be right for you? What the data doesn't take into consideration. So you're looking at RPMs, it's force times cadence.
Cadence, yeah.
But what that doesn't take into consideration is the direction in which that force is going in at a given, what we call moment. So a moment in physics terms is where something is, at that time. So as an example, most people pedal solely in this direction.
Okay.
So they're turning linear force into rotational force.
Just for those that are not watching, those listening, you're pointing down.
So imagine
forward.
That's your crank at that point. So this is the center of the bottom bracket, and this is where your pedal is. What you're actually doing is you're pedaling in that direction. So we can actually measure the direction of force at any given moment. And even when it's there, you're still pushing in that direction. And even when it's there, you're still pushing in that direction. So and that's where force times cadence doesn't work. So it depends entirely on the direction in which you're producing force. Now, if you're solely producing force in that direction, then a longer crank can sometimes be better for you, because at that 3 or 9 o'clock position, you actually create the most amount of leverage at that point. The disadvantage is at the top, where you're not engaging the hip flexor. And then anecdotally, what we're finding is greater muscle recruitment on a shorter crank, but it can go too short. So there's interpretation of data is really important in that respect.
So what's a common misconception of bike fitting that people have, or what's a myth around bike fitting that you would love to debunk?
Well, that it's like snake oil, that it's somehow that it's all bullshit. That's the myth that I'd like, or that people don't see value in it. We often get a lot of people that come in and they'll have sort of £10,000 to £15,000 worth of bike, never had a bike fit before. And in fact, we get world tour riders that come see us who have never had a bike fit before. It is a proper science. I mean, there is, we have a governing body which has changed within the last year, 18 months or so, the president, and our current president is really trying to push the qualification. So in a couple of years' time, it will be a degree course. So it'll be a 3-year degree.
What is it at the moment?
At the moment, there are 4 levels. So you have level 1, which is a bike technician.
Okay.
And then you have level 2, which is where you're dealing with multiple disciplines like mountain biking, gravel, time trial, that sort of thing. And then you have level 3, where you're dealing with people with severe injuries.
Okay.
And then you have level 4, where you're a master of your craft. And obviously I'm at level 4.
I thought you were level 5.
Of course. So that's where it is at the moment. And level 4 is almost like an invited, it's not even a qualification.
Yeah, it's like a private circle.
Yeah, it's like the circle of trust.
Yeah.
So really there's effectively 3 levels. And then the 4th level is, for like us Jedis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my best advice is if somebody's looking for a bike fitter is to check the IBFI website. So the International Bike Fitters Institute. If you check the website, it's got all the different qualifications of the bike fitters that are qualified within the UK, Europe and the rest of the world.
Okay.
Generally, the best bike fitters in the world are in the UK.
How come?
I don't know, really. I think it's quite a progressive thing. So because we're a small island, obviously there's the concentration of potentially with bike fitters. And also I think that James Thomas, Bike Fit James, has done an awful lot to sort of raise the profile of bike fitting and how it helps people. So we've got a lot to thank James for. And he's a great guy, he's really a great guy. So people have watched his videos and then become qualified. So we have more bike fitters in the UK per square mile than there is anywhere else in the world.
I suppose there's a big cycling culture in the UK.
And the other thing is as well, with people like me, I'm not the sort of person that says, no, these are my secrets.
Yeah.
It's like I want to share everything. So, if there's any bike fitters out there that are watching this and have managed to make it this far,
I'm sure they will.
Please get in contact with us. If you want to come and shadow us and see what we do, I want the quality of the service to be greater than it is currently. Because there's an awful lot of terrible bike fitters out there.
Yeah.
That are unqualified.
And the more you share your secret, the more there's people doing it. Actually, I guess it raises more questions and it pushes everyone up.
Yeah. And there are still things that I'm noticing now. I've been sort of bike fitting in one way or another for 30 years now. So, there are things that where as technology moves on, you can sort of think, well, I'm going to test that theory, and you can genuinely test it because the equipment's so much better than it was, even 10 years ago. So if you've got a larger pool of people that are testing theories as they've got more technology, then obviously you have a greater understanding as to what's going on. And, even I learned a technique last year from a level 1 bike fitter for cleat alignment. I thought that is really, really clever. So, even though I'm a level 4 and he was a level 1 at the time, it doesn't mean that, I can discount his information. I thought that's brilliant. That's really, and if it's a good idea, it's a good idea.
See, that makes me actually trust you even more. And it's the same with, I was chatting with John the other day, who's a great photographer, and he's been in the industry for nearly 20 years. And it's the same with other people that I met, and they're really advanced in their career. They know their craft, but they wouldn't have any issue admitting that they're still learning.
Yeah,
and they're learning from people that are just getting into it. And having that ability to just put your ego down to the side and just be humble enough to accept that you, even though you're advanced, you don't know everything.
No.
And you're still willing to learn from anyone.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's progression in any industry, really. And I think if you think you know it all, you're missing out. So thank you, Simon, for that, by the way.
Is there a category of people or type of cyclists that bike fitting is not for? Is there anyone that wouldn't benefit from bike fitting?
There are certain categories of individual that are, you have to have a very good knowledge of the human body to help them. So we have a cast iron guarantee that if somebody isn't 100% blown away by what we do, that they don't pay. And I had 2 people that didn't pay about 15 years ago because they were so injured within the parameters of the bike that they had that I just couldn't get them into that particular position that I needed to get them in. So all I was doing is I was transferring injury or discomfort from one area, it would leave, and then I'd transfer it somewhere else. So but I spent 16 hours with those individuals and they didn't want a refund. Okay. But I think, as a bike fitter, particularly, if you're like a level 1 or a level 2, that you have to admit halfway through the day, if somebody is quite a complex case, that actually, you are above where where my particular qualification sort of finishes. Yeah. And a lot of bike fitters try and help people because ultimately they've got to make a living. But where a lot of people have, where a lot of the public have become disheartened with bike fit is where, a bike fitter suggested that they can make a difference to them and they've actually made the situation worse because they haven't admitted that it's above their remit or above their qualification. But in general, I would say no, everyone can be helped from bike fit and certainly made to feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. If you imagine there's like a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 being the most comfortable, and then 0 is like you got spikes on the handlebars, so it's the most uncomfortable thing that you could ever be at. Most people are about 3 or 4. Okay, and nobody ever gets to 10 without knowing. Yeah, huh. And then this is on an imaginary scale. Yeah. And then we try and get you as near to 10 as possible. Obviously, 10 is impossible because even if you've stubbed your toe at some point in your life, we've all experienced some kind of injury, and at some point the asymmetry of the body will change. So you go from being symmetrical, to being asymmetrical. Yeah. Because of something, where you stub your toe or bang your knee or something, or graze your knee when you're a kid, and that has a knock-on effect. So you're never, ever going to get to 10, but we can certainly get you very close. Okay, at 10, it would pretty much mean that you could sleep on your bike. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you'd be a robot, really. Yeah, true. Yeah. That's the thing.
Well, from what you said earlier, you fit World Tour riders, and sometimes it can help them winning competitions, and people can benefit from a bike fitting and be better on the bike. So comfort and performance are not opposite of the same scale, are they?
No, they're not.
Because, there's this image where, especially in, I'd say, cycling time trial, for example, where you need to be in that aero-aggressive position, which is uncomfortable, but it's aero. So suck up the pain and you'll be fine. Just get used to it and you'll be fine.
I'll let you into a little secret. Okay. There is no compromise. Okay. People think there is, but there isn't. It's especially in aero TT. If you look at wind tunnel testing, for instance, when you go for a wind tunnel test on your TT bike, you are met with an aerodynamicist rather than a biomechanist. Yeah. So the aerodynamicist makes that person as aero as they can possibly be. and in doing so, will sacrifice comfort.
Yeah.
When we go to the wind tunnel, we'll use the advice of the aerodynamicist and also the biomechanical knowledge that we have in order to get that rider in the right position. And I was talking to Lee Prescott, who is president of the IBFI, and we were talking about biomechanics and stuff. And he's actually got an office at Silverstone. And he was saying that the aerodynamicist said to him, "How come every time you put a rider into a position, the power goes up and the CDA doesn't change?"
Okay.
So it's a myth that it's within reason. There are parameters around that, but it's all to do with balancing the torso. So from the side, if you're looking at a rider directly from the side, that position where their back is unique to them, and it's unique to the power they're producing for the event that they're doing. So obviously, the more power a rider produces, the lower and further forward the position needs to be, and also is more comfortable for them.
Yeah.
So the two are part and parcel. It's quite complicated to explain, but basically it's to do with the further you bank somebody's back over, within reason, depending on flexibility, the more power they have to...
You can't be completely bent.
But the more power they have to produce in order to take weight off the arms.
Yes.
So obviously the downward force on the pedal counterbalances the weight in the torso.
Yeah.
So what you should feel is an ability to pull on the bars rather than what we see a lot of time trialists do, which is push away from the bars.
Yeah.
So you often see riders like this rather than like that. And obviously, if you're doing a pursuit where you're producing sort of 600 watts, 650 watts for 4 minutes, or it's even more than that now in a lot of cases, that position can be lower and further forward than it would be if you were an Ironman triathlete. So because you're producing less power because you've got to run a marathon afterwards. Yeah. So there's lots of things to consider, but there isn't within the parameters of what we're talking about now. Comfort, aerodynamics, and power all reach the same point on a graph.
Okay, so you can align them. You don't always have to sacrifice one for the other. They can live together.
There was a really interesting YouTube video that I saw a couple of weeks ago, and the guy tested power, aero, and comfort. And comfort was the fastest out of the three of them. Huh. I mean, what they're doing is they're taking one aspect. Obviously the comfort aspect. He was aero in that comfort position, and he could produce more power in that comfortable position as well. So, I would argue that was probably the right position. But if you're looking at the three as an individual, obviously there are considerations, with if he's on a bike, he's going to be producing power. So, you can't single out comfort. You can't single out power, and because they're all blended together. But technically, in terms of what he was saying, he was most comfortable in this position and he produced the fastest time in this position.
And how often does ego get into the way of a good bike fit? Because someone can come in and have this preconceived idea that if I want to be fast, I need to be uncomfortable. This looks good and it looks fast, so this is what I need to achieve. How easy is it for you to convince him that it's not the case?
This is the best question. It's a really great question. So we call it the battle. That interpretation of data, misinterpreted what they've said. And we normally find it with club racing cyclists who have been racing a long time and have cut the steerer tube on their bike and the bars are far too low. And we get this, am I aero? Am I aero? And you go, no. And then you bring the bars up and the head drops. And actually they become more aerodynamic. And we have this ongoing battle. So it's not an unpleasant thing. It's just that there's, sort of, I have this knowledge, you have this knowledge, and, and then it's sort of, we sort of, we generally tend to find it with club cyclists and time trialists. in a lot of cases, we're actually bringing the front end up. That's an example of what we see most of the time, is that front end needs to come up and actually makes the rider more comfortable and more aerodynamic.
Okay.
Lots of things are misunderstood within cycling, and that's one of them, one of the key issues. The other key issue is that, we get it a lot with smaller riders where they've brought the saddle forward because they can't make the stem any shorter. So they're trying to reduce the distance between the handlebars and the saddle. And actually what they need to do is they've unbalanced their pelvis, or unbalanced everything above the saddle in relation to the bottom bracket. And actually, if they brought the saddle back, they drop forwards and then they're closer to the bars.
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, if you want to be more aero, not in all cases, there's a pocket. So we bring the bars up and the head drops. And if you want to get closer to the bars, you bring the saddle back. So, which is counterintuitive.
Completely. Yeah. That's not the first thing you would think about. You'd actually do the opposite.
Exactly. And, opening hip angles, they bring the saddle further forward to open up the hip angle, but actually it has the opposite effect in some cases. So we talk about pockets.
Yeah.
So there's a pocket in which the handlebar height is right and where the reach is right and where you are in relation to the bottom bracket with regard to the saddle in terms of your torso balance. And that's all related to how much power you produce for the event that you're doing. So if you're a Sunday weekend warrior, you're going to produce an amount of power where your torso is balanced. That's very different to the amount of power that you're producing if you're holding like 350 watts for a tour stage, for instance. 5 hours at 340 watts. It's not uncommon. But some of the powers that these World Tour riders are producing is like amazing.
Now we know their secrets. Get fitted to your bike.
Exactly.
We'll put it down to that. How often does it happen that sometimes you could see an ideal position for someone, but their body is not ready for that yet? Or does it have to be the position for the person at that point? Or can it be a position that they could reach, it would be great for them, but their body needs a bit of work off the bike to get to that position?
So again, another great question, because again, when you're looking at other bike fitters, so we give you unlimited readjustments.
Okay, for life.
For the entire time you own your bike.
Your bike, okay.
So let's say imagine that you're twisted at the pelvis. So when you pedal, you're pedaling like this, but you're on the bike straight like this, and your body's sort of banked over that way. As an exaggeration. That to you feels straight. Now, if I put you straight on the bike, you're going to feel like you're being pushed off to the right. It doesn't quite work like that. If if you're going to critique me other bike fitters, this is just for the sake of this.
It's an example, so that we can understand.
Exactly. So what we would do is we want that rider to ride straight, but their body's not ready for it. So what we do is we put them in a position that their body wants to be in at that moment in time. So and it would be really comfortable for them. And then we give them a series of corrective exercises, and then over the next sort of 6 months or so, their body will start to free itself. And it's all to do with the central nervous system. So in a lot of cases, it's not that people are inflexible, but there is an imbalance between, for instance, quads and hamstrings. That's what we see an awful lot of. And once that balance is better, the bike position that we fitted them in no longer is optimal for them at that moment in time. And that's the phone call that I love, because it means that they've done what they should have done. So it means that they're really taking care of what, and they're trying to achieve their optimal position. And then we readjust them. And then they go, oh, wow, that feels just like it did the first time. And then we might need to see them again. So generally, if somebody's got severe asymmetry, or like a twisted pelvis is the classic example, which we see a lot of, we'd see them on the first day, and then we'd see them about 4 to 6 weeks later for an adjustment. And then we generally tend to see them about 6 months after that. And then we'll probably see them once a year.
Okay.
Some of our clients see us where there's I call it the tights change. So when you go from tights to shorts and shorts to tights again. So if you go sort of end of September, position may need to change because you're carrying more clothing, so that affects your position. If you really want to dial it into the nth degree. And obviously, when your flexibility is different in the summer than it is in the winter, because of in some cases the food you eat. So we generally tend to eat much lighter food in the summer.
In the summer, yeah.
So generally tend to be more meat and salads and veg and things like that, lots of barbecues. And then obviously in the winter, the food can be quite heavy.
Yes.
You know, your percentage of body fat changes in the winter because obviously your body is trying to keep you warm.
Keep warm, yeah.
So that has an impact on bike fit.
Yeah, and also I suppose in the winter you are a bit more tense because it is colder.
Cold.
Yeah. You spoke earlier about breathing.
Yes.
And I saw in the reviews, you know, doing some research for the podcast. And there's this curious thing. I was expecting to see lots of things about, obviously, you know, how you are, how the experience is, how people feel better on their bike, the way they pedal, I guess. But then there was a lot of mention about breathing.
Yes.
What's the deal about breathing? Because bike fitting and breathing, I wouldn't really necessarily put them together or expect to have the same, I don't know, consultation with someone. What's the deal with breathing?
Well, breathing controls how your body is and how you feel.
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, certain breathing techniques can help with your mental health, for instance. So you can cleanse the body by breathing in a certain way. In Tibet, they did a study on monks with when monks went into a trance, and when they meditate, they're in a faraway plane. They're not on this planet anymore.
Yeah.
And they did there was a study done where they gave the monks LSD, and it had no effect on them at all.
Okay.
Because they were already in that transcendental state, you know, or have experienced it previously by just breathing in a different way and clearing the mind. So there's certain techniques that we can teach you to clear your brain, so it eliminates all of the fog. So I'm a massive fan of Wim Hof. I think Wim Hof is just incredible human being. And he does a particular technique where you utilize all of the entire chest. So do you want me to show you?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it'll come up on camera, but basically...
here it will come, yeah.
So the first part of the breathing is to breathe into the belly. So what you do is you push your belly out like that, and you breathe behind the belly. In effect, that's what it feels like. So it's definitely an excuse worth remembering. Yeah, you know, I'm just doing Wim Hof. Yeah. The next thing you do is you keep your belly out, and then you breathe into the chest cavity, and then lastly, you think there's no more room in there, but you actually have room into the collarbone. So you go up there, and then you think there's definitely no more room, and then the last bit is you breathe into the mouth. And then capture that last bit of breath. And then what you'll notice is, can you feel in your body you're tense now?
Yeah,
So
completely.
If you breathe out and let all that tension go, it's best if you do it when you're lying down. So if you go belly, chest, collarbone, and then head, and then breathe out and let that tension go, you'll start to notice in your brain that you're feeling a bit lightheaded.
Yeah, I was almost feeling like I could go to sleep now.
Really relax.
You keep talking. I'll just...
I'll make you a cocoa with it. So if you repeat that, and then so if you do that 10 times, and then on the 10th breath, so when you go belly, chest, collarbone, head, on the 10th breath, you tense every muscle in your body and hold your breath for as long as you possibly can, and then breathe out. You'll feel all of the tension go. Now, you do that on a cyclical basis. So you do it belly, chest, collarbone, head 10 times, tense, hold your breath, relax, let it go. Keep going. Do that for about half an hour. At the end of the half an hour, you can actually hold your breath for about 3 or 4 minutes. And what you're doing is you're oxygenating all of your body. Now, the other thing that's happened, I've had grown men, when I'm doing this particular technique, just burst into tears. And the reason that happens is the tension is held within the body at any moment in time. Yeah. So as you're sitting there now, if you scanned around the body, you would feel tension. So you might feel it in the feet, if somebody's annoying you. So we often find we get a lot of people that are under huge pressure from work. So they've got very good jobs that people come and see us. And, if their boss is being a bit of an arse, there'll be tension there.
I like how you said they've got really good job and they're under pressure. It's like, but yeah.
And tension is the enemy of performance. Once that tension goes, the emotion that is attached to that goes with it. So, for instance, you'll find, I had one person, I released some part of his body, I don't know where it was, but he just burst into tears. And it was the tension that was holding that particular emotion in. And once that's gone, it's gone. So this is why Wim Hof is really good for mental health, because it enables the person to clear their brain. So if you try this tonight when you're laying in bed, you've got to be completely straight, ideally flat. Seek the tension and then remove it. So if you do belly, chest, collarbone, head, tense every muscle in the body, relax and let it go. You'll feel your mind completely clear.
I won't send you a picture of me bursting into tears, but I was right.
I'm always here for you. Always here for you. So what we do is we teach that technique, and then we also teach it on the bike, so you can start to feel tension within your cycling. So, for instance, when you're going uphill, and there is a tendency to do this, or somebody attacks, and you don't relax and go after them, but you should. Okay. So you shouldn't tense up because, and this is where we get really sciencey. So if you look at it from a science point of view, you have something called effective force, which is what propels you forwards. If that leg is under tension on the way down, the other leg has to overcome it at the top.
Yes.
So for one half of a pedal rev, it's better. For the rest, you get this.
It's clunky.
So the more relaxed you are, the less what we call brake force you apply. So you've got effective force, and then you've got brake force, which is the negative force being created on the pedal as it returns to the top of the stroke. It's the difference between the effective force and the brake force, which dictates how fast you go. Now, in some cases, we're getting riders that produce 700 newtons on the way down and 500 newtons on the way up. And the difference is 200 newtons. But we also have riders that have been to see us, like Rory, who works with me. He produces 220 and 20. Difference is still 200 newtons.
Yes.
But obviously he's producing 480 newtons less than a guy that's producing 700 and 500.
Yeah.
So it's a very crude example. But if you can eliminate that tension, you go faster.
You unleashing more of your potential.
Exactly that.
So the car still goes at the same speed, but you're removing the brakes.
It's better tuned.
Okay,
the engine's better tuned, for want of a better word. And then the other thing that you can do is, we all know deep breaths. Calm down, deep breaths.
Yeah.
Well, we can actually flip that on its head, and we can actually create an aggression within the body by breathing differently. So if you've ever seen, ever been unfortunate enough to see two people having a punch up, I'm going to kill him, Well, that breathing technique is the body's way of priming itself to either fight or flight or get out there as quickly as possible. So we can actually teach you how to put your body into that state. And what you see in front of you is a significant increase in power, albeit temporarily. So we teach a technique to, if you're going to attack, that's what you need to do. We also teach people not to use it all the time, because otherwise other people are going, oh, Hammerdale's gonna attack now. He's doing his breathing technique. So, and we also teach you how to pre-oxygenate prior to a climb. If you know there's a climb coming up, it won't make a significant difference in terms of it's going to get you over the top of the climb without breathing, but it might make 20, 25 revs difference. So you're that much further up before you'll start gassing.
So you've seen people have better performances not by being fitter, but just by adjusting the way they breathe or working on the way they breathe.
And most people, the issue is not breathing in. The issue is getting air out.
Okay.
So in a lot of cases, what we actually find is, and so they've only got like a tiny little bit of air that they're actually exchanging in the lungs. Whereas actually, if you get rid of all of the air, the next breath that you take in is going to be oxygenated air. So rather than leaving the carbon dioxide in the lungs, so again, in layman's terms, for the sake of this podcast, so what we teach is people that, they need to exhale more than they need to breathe in. So all of these things make a huge difference. We put it on a nice little package for you to understand. And again, anecdotally, we used to ask for reviews from people. When we used to say to people, look, if you've got any friends that are you could recommend to us, please let them know. And they'll go away and they'll destroy all of their friends on a Sunday ride. And they say, I'm not letting any of them know what my secret is. They're never coming to see you.
It is an advantage. And if you're a competitor, you want to keep your cards close to your chest.
Exactly.
But I suppose it is something a lot of people can definitely benefit from. And it was just so surprising seeing everyone speak about it. It's like, what's the deal with breathing? I thought I was getting there to get my bike fitted, not breathing.
Of it. But obviously, you've got to be in the right position to enable your diaphragm to move in the way that it needs to. But one of the lovely things was I helped Zoe Backstead. And I showed her the breathing techniques, and I'm putting her world championship down to me. Obviously it's not her talent, her lineage.
It's down to
it's all down to my breathing.
And that's why I wanted to invite you. That's why you're here, because you're the magician behind the performance.
But Magnus Backstitch texted me, and he said she was doing Zoe was doing the breathing techniques as she came past the pit lane, and that was where the attack went. She would have won anyway. I mean, she's amazing. And I also showed James Shaw when he was at Ribble. So James, I don't know if you know about James, but he was a pro when he was 19 with Lotto.
Okay.
And then he was in the wilderness for a bit and dropped down to Pro Conti. And then he got away in a break with Pogacar in the Tour of Slovenia. And he used all the techniques that I showed him to stay with Pogacar.
Oh, wow.
And that's what got him his ride at EF, that is where he is now. So, again, it's all down to me, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of yoga and breathing techniques off the bike, but you wouldn't think of using that as a hack.
Yeah, it's
a
great hack, But when, I would advise anyone that's watching this or listening to this, seek tension within the body. If you're riding and you feel tense, then that muscle isn't working properly because it's being held in a position and the other leg or, other parts of the body are having to overcome that tension. So the other thing is as well, I mean, I think that one of the reasons why Pogacar is so good is he's so relaxed.
Yes.
And he enjoys riding his bike so much that you don't really see any tension within his body. And yet when he got dropped by Vingegaard, all the tension appeared.
Yeah.
So you often find that there's a lot of, when somebody's confident enough, the tension leaves their body. So they're not fighting the bike. And we call that flow state. So when you're in flow state, everything becomes easy.
Now that you mention it, he often does seated attacks anyway, and he climbs seated. You would very rarely see him off the saddle trying to drop everyone.
No, but he works on pedaling technique.
Yes, yeah.
And, if you actually look at a graph of effective force, most people start around about the 12 o'clock position and then generally finish their effective force at the 6 o'clock position.
So it's that whole arc at the front.
Yeah. Ironically, cyclocross riders start at 10 and finish at 8.
Okay.
So nobody pulls between 8 and 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's very ineffective to do that. But Pogacar utilises the whole of the pedal stroke, which means that he doesn't have to apply as much force. The two legs are working together with each other rather than left leg, right leg, left leg, right leg.
What would you like someone to take from this conversation about bike fitting?
Well, I'd like them to book with me, obviously. No, I just want them to understand that bike fitting is for everyone. What's really great is that we've changed our marketing over the last 6 years. So previously, I used to, have my arm around like a world tour rider, and if I put that on social media, I'd get 60,000 hits on it. And I used to think that if this person here is trusting me with their bike fit, then you, Mr. Weekend Warrior, obviously should come and see me. And what was really interesting is that we had a very brave woman come and see us, and she's quite overweight. And she said, I didn't come and see you for a long, long time because I thought you were elitist. I thought you only dealt with elite riders. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, we genuinely love everyone, And then I did a fit for a guy who was 22 stone. So he's about 120 kilos, something like that. More than that. And he wasn't like the tallest person in the world. And normally we get 60,000 hits with a world tour rider, and he got 90,000 hits or 90,000, acknowledgements.
Yeah.
On social media, and my phone went mad overnight. And so we started to tell real people's real stories, what they've had to overcome in terms of discomfort or injury, and just try and tell their story, really. Yeah.
Which is what people want to. People want people they can relate to.
Exactly. It's got to be relatable. That is the word. You're absolutely right. I can't relate to somebody riding up Alpe d'Huez in the middle of the Tour de France when there's 500,000 people on there.
Yeah.
It's unrelatable. But I can relate to, the struggle of a cyclist, sort of in discomfort or pain. So we all know what that feeling is like when you've got nothing left in the tank, or, you've got neck ache or back ache or whatever that might be, because your bike's in the wrong position. So that's more relatable. And we want to sort of emphasize to people, look, everyone is welcome,
Because in the end, if you can get more people active, I'm all about trying to convince people that being active is actually easier than you think.
Oh, it's far more easy. Yeah.
The barrier to entry is very, very, just go outside, wear your old trainers, whatever, start with whatever you have. And then, as you go along, make it more comfortable. And then, just go outside and be active.
Yes.
And for you, what's the most rewarding thing you think in your job or during a fitting session?
I had somebody a couple of weeks ago that was on the verge of tears. If I don't sort this out today, I'm giving up cycling. And he fractured his back and was in all sorts of pain. And we solved 90% or 99% of his issues on that bike, and the rest is going to be solvable over the next sort of 6 to 8 months. And he was over the moon, absolutely over the moon. I mean, if you have a look at my Instagram, there's a guy on there called John, and he has no toes.
Okay.
So I made him some toes and got him cycling again. So you'll see on there, if you have a look on, it's can you still ride without toes? So it's these people that we're keeping on the bike. I think it's so important. I think it's important, first of all, for mental health. Everyone needs to exercise for their own mental health, get the blood flowing. And we're involved a lot with London to Paris. So a lot of charities will do London to Paris. And I think there's something really amazing about being able to go from one country to another under your own steam.
Yes.
I think it's just amazing. I think it's great. And it doesn't even have to be that. It just could be that, actually, I'm going to ride around the block today. Or, you know what, I don't want to take the car to work today. I'm going to take my bike. And just arriving at work feeling amazing. The thing that fires me up in the morning is knowing that we're going to help somebody that day. And we get paid for it. So it's great.
It's great. Yeah, it is great. I like how, you said at the beginning, you just want to be a good human.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of being a good human, is helping other people. Because, finding that love of bike, or finding that love of bike again because you helped them.
Yeah.
And helping them being active. thus helping their mental health is all part of being a good human and being caring. So thank you for what you do, Ben.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
Yeah. As a closing tradition on this podcast, I have one more question for you. When you find yourself daydreaming, what does your mind drift towards?
Well, I think I'm still the greatest rider that's never won the Tour de France, you see. So I'm always in that top step on the podium. No, I mean, I think as a father now, my main concern is whether my kids are happy. You know, that's and whether Emma's happy as well. You know, it's you know, we all go through difficult stages, but you know, I find myself wondering about what the world's going to be like for my kids when they're older, and you know, and there's a lot of negativity in the world at the moment. So we try and keep our little bit of positivity on the world, you know, within our, you know, our little family, and then try to give a little bit of that out on a daily basis to various people. I always want my main picture is, you know, walking my daughter down the aisle, you know, when she's married, or you know,
to a good cyclist, obviously.
Yes, of course. Well, in all honesty, as long as she's happy, you know, that's all that matters. And you know, I look forward to the day when I become a grandfather, you know, and you know, you just sort of, your mind wanders, doesn't it, into the future. What does that future look like? But I think if you can picture it being a nice place to be in, then that's half the battle won already, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
So, and then if you can, you know, give off a little bit of positivity to whoever, and even if you just make their day a bit better, then it's, you know, you've done your bit, haven't you?
Yeah. I saw this poster the other day in a coffee shop, and it was saying, "Be the reason someone smiles today."
Yeah.
I mean, if you live by that every day, it's just making the world a better place one day at a time, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I was talking to someone the other day about this. I went to London, you know, or I went to Rouleur for the bike show, and in the press, this is terrible about London, and you're going to get robbed, and this is happening. And all I saw was smiley faces.
Yeah,
just saw lots of happy people around.
Yeah,
and you know, I just think that we're sold this narrative that life is terrible, and actually life's beautiful, really. You know, you've just got to find it in the simplest things. You know, it's, you know, I mean, my favourite thing to do is on a Saturday we have movie night in our house, and we all snuggle up with the kids on the sofa, and I fall asleep because it's the time when my brain is completely clear and I'm so relaxed. I just fall asleep because that's my happy place. You know, I have not a care in the world when I'm sat there with with everyone on the sofa. Yeah. You know, and you know, I want other people to experience that sort of joy that you feel. And so I'm getting all choked now. But yeah, so I just look forward to a happy future with my kids, and you know, and just don't believe everything that you read. And you know, life is beautiful. People are beautiful. Let's find the good in each other rather than trying to find the differences. That's what I think.
Yeah.
So,
thank you, Ben.
You're very welcome.
It's been a great discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm very, very grateful that you came. We never met before.
No.
Today is the first time we actually meet. I mean, we spoke on the phone, and it just seemed like it was obvious that we had to have this chat.
Oh, that's lovely.
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and that you're going to try the breathing techniques at home. If you want to find Ben on social media, how can we find you on social media?
On Instagram as @BikeFitBen.
Get in touch with him if you have any further questions. And in the meantime, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.